So welcome back to the afternoon sessions. I hope you've enjoyed your breakout sessions, whichever ones you chose. I think there's some lots of animated conversations still going on about those, so looks like some good stuff took place. Stuff's the word of today. I'm going to start off the afternoon sessions with a conversation about where PSN, Public Services Network, is going next. We've touched on PSN throughout the course of the day to one extent or another. But to do it proper justice, we have Noelle Godfrey from the Head of Digital Infrastructure at Cambridge County Council, and John Stubley, who's the PSN Authority Director in the Cabinet Office. And ask Noelle to be first speaker. Thank you very much, Noelle.
Thank you. So I was talking about this to somebody earlier on. I know that this session is headed PSN Where Next, but I think I'm going to start looking forward by looking back, really. And again, this has been the subject of some conversation so far today. But my first observation is that if you go back 18 months, 2 years maybe, and if you asked anybody involved in local government IT in my neck of the woods, but also in other areas of the country, and you said, what pops into your head if I say PSN? A good number of them would probably have said savings, collaboration, platform for shared services. But now, I'd say pretty much universally across the country, if you utter that innocuous little phrase PSN now to almost anybody in local government, you'll see an involuntary shudder and a look of pain will pass across their face. And if they're involved in local government IT, they might even start to kind of hiss and spit like a cornered cat. And that's kind of where we've got to today. We've, as I said, we've had some conversation today about how have we come to this place now, and more importantly, how can we sort of get back to where we were. So that's why I want to start with looking back, because I think we need to look backwards to look forward, because really the reasons why PSN was so important 2 years ago are just as valid now, if not more. And I think we need to understand that to help us sort of keep the faith, keep on engaging with the PSN programme, and make sure we really are getting the benefits from it. So in looking back, I probably could have used examples from many areas across England, or indeed Wales, because across the piece, local public services have really been the front runners for PSN. So we could have been talking about Kent, but Hampshire, Essex, Staffordshire, more recently Yorkshire and Humber, West Midlands, and there's probably many other areas I've not mentioned. Because local councils have been, we're embracing the concept of PSN, adopting the approach before other areas of government actually even dip their toes into the water. Moving back though to our own situation in Cambridgeshire. We first embarked on a PSN approach back in 2010, before the national frameworks were in place. The County Council, along with 3 district councils, a fire authority and the Citizens Advice Bureau representing the voluntary and community sector in Cambridgeshire, we went to the market to procure a PSN, and we started off the ODU process with a supplier day. And our chief exec was there. And I thought I'd just reprise for you some of the things he said about it, about what we were aiming for. He said, it's about savings, but not just savings, it's about doing things differently. Our citizens in Cambridgeshire rightly expect a seamless, joined-up approach from their public services, and increasingly this includes the voluntary and the third sector. Our aspirations going forward are for our staff to be able to access systems and provide services where and when needed across the county, regardless of physical location or who owns the building. However, at a time when public trust in government's ability to keep data safe is low, we also need to ensure we have a secure, standards-based network that's compliant with the increasingly stringent National Information Assurance approach for public sector data. And bearing in mind that was back in 2010, that was back in those halcyon days before we all realised quite how difficult public sector financing was going to get. But following on from that, we went on to award contract in 2011, and the Cambridgeshire Public Services Network, or CPSN, as we refer to it, has delivered what we thought at the time we needed. We've had savings to the County Council alone of over £1 million a year. The partnership quickly grew to 11 organisations, and there's still more expected to join this year. But the sad truth is that that's just not enough. Since 2010, as I said, the public finances have been hit far harder than we ever thought they would, and even the most pessimistic people could not have predicted how deep the austerity regime was going to go. So in our own case of Cambridgeshire County Council, and I'm sure, I know this is reflected across the country, in the period between 2011 through to 2018-19, it's estimated that the overall county council budgets were reduced by almost 40%. Now that's at a time when the calls on our services are increasing, not declining, as we're one of the fastest growing counties in the country. So whilst we're slashing budgets, we're simultaneously coping with a significantly increased demand for services, but we're also expected to put in the infrastructure and support to help the local economy continue to grow. So whilst £1 million per year savings they're very important and they're very worthwhile, they're not going to solve the current financial cliff edge that we're facing. They're a tiny percentage of the average £30 million per year-on-year budget reductions we've been facing from 2011, and which we expect to continue through to about 2018-19. So, like many other councils, we've been doing a range of things to help us cope with this, really. Inevitably, we've been doing what other authorities have been doing. We've been cutting back on non-statutory services, but there's still an awful lot we have to provide. So we've been doing other things. We've been increasing our shared back office services. We've been seeking new ways to deliver services by collaborating, by deduplicating and transforming our services with other public sector partners. We've been accelerating our digital-first approach to deliver what people want, but also to cut the cost of customer contact and transactions. And we've been reconfiguring our service delivery and making service innovation and the better use of technology central to our business plan. But it goes without saying that, if we're going to even begin to deliver this agenda, we need a flexible, reliable, affordable, joined-up telecommunications infrastructure that's an enabler for collaboration. And actually it was interesting, I couldn't help but notice this morning we had an example of that, because we had some a really interesting demo from GDS about what they were doing with the dashboard. But sadly, because the communications didn't work, we couldn't see it. The network wasn't available, therefore it didn't work. And that for me just does symbolise why we have to get the network connectivity stuff right. And in our own area, I realised how closely we've come to delivering bits of this. When somebody I was discussing with the recent co-location of one of our county council teams in one of our local district council offices, which is part of the sort of service reconfiguration programme that I was talking about. And what they actually said was, the move wasn't too bad, and of course the IT and the connectivity was the easy bit really, because it all just worked. And how often do you hear that about IT? So that was really gratifying. But moving forward, we need to utilise the latest technology, innovation and the tool sets, the kind of things that we've heard about this morning around BYOD, cloud-based services, the need for ubiquitous connectivity, in order to continue to meet those fast-changing needs. And at the same time that we need to collectively maintain our grip on, if you like, on the information assurance across multiple partners, we also need to enable the boundaries between our organisations to become more porous, Because as we go forward, it's not just about sharing buildings and back office services, it's about sharing our systems and sharing our processes too. And we have to find a way of doing that. So, again, there's been a lot of talk today. We've kind of all emerging, I think, battered and bruised from the compliance process. And, in part, that was the necessary faster pace of migration, which was effectively forced on us through the transition from GCSX. But now that we are coming out of that, I believe we are kind of coming through that process. And I think there are really just a very small number of councils now that are still going through that compliance process. It's vital that we really make the most of the positives and we gain from all the pain that we've been through. And I think, as I've illustrated in the case of my own council, we've got such a tough agenda that I don't think we can deliver it without PSN. It has to work for us, and it has to work for all of local government, really. I do think that over the last few months things have been turning around. I think there's been a much better relationship emerging with the Cabinet Office. It started with a letter from Stephen Kelly in January with a promise to improve the compliance process. And whilst in some cases it's been a slow and tortuous process, I think that's happened, and evidenced by the fact that we've got John speaking here today. There's been some really useful, helpful things coming through, like the recent negotiation of an extension of security support for XP with Microsoft, and I think going forward, I'm optimistic that we can actually address some of these things. I think the other thing I wanted to mention before handing over to John was the Solutions Advisory Group, or the SAG, as it's so eloquently named. I don't know what it is about IT. We can't do anything without a TLA, can we? So the Solutions Advisory Group has been operating in a sort of shadow form with volunteers to help go through some of the thorny compliance issues for some authorities. But a number of people like Steve, Dylan, Nick and others have been working to establish a dedicated resource team which will act as a communication point and helping to solve some of these issues going forward. And as part of that, you might have seen that there's a crowdfunding initiative that's been led through Socitm, and there's that's been really quite successful in terms of bringing funding in. Although inevitably it's not enough, and it needs to be more. There needs to be more. But importantly as well, the PSN GB, who are the sort of trade organisation for PSN suppliers, they've made a really quite substantial offer of assistance into the SAG, of independent consultancy support for over the next year, but also bringing in subject matter experts in sort of different areas of technical and security issues as needed. So going forward, I really do think that the Solutions Advisory Group is a means by which we can bring together the local government voice, make sure that we're properly engaged in all the issues, and start to ensure that going forward we have a compliance process that works for us. The procurement frameworks as we go forward work for local government, and we actually make sure that it really is that platform for collaboration that we all need it to be. At that point, I think I'll hand over to John.
Thank you. Right. I've been with PSN for quite a while, so I've been there in the days when I used to be welcome to various conferences, and also in the days when I have to duck the bread rolls that are thrown at me. So it has changed, and I do hope I share Noelle's view that we're back on the road to much greater collaboration and working together. I think what's happened in the last year has been necessary. but I think we're in a good place now and move forward from here very well. So I'm going to talk a bit about PSN. I've got a standard slide set here, but I'm going to skip through a few because it's. I'm assuming everybody here knows what PSN is, so why it's important. I'll just let people look at that for a second. What does it offer? I think people know what PSN's about. Great. Get on to maybe sort of some of the facts and figures about where we are with PSN. PSN is already making a difference. There's already 130 million spend per annum is being achieved. That was by on the 1.1 billion per annum by 2014-15. That's per year where it's been made. In fact, we're going above that, but that's sort of the target. It's 130 per million per year savings. In total, 146 million have been saved by 2012-13. And the typical business case, and I'm not saying this is every business case, there are always exceptions to a rule, but we're finding that 40 to 50% savings for buying through PSN. And these are all figures that are agreed by the National Audit Office. They've been audited, and they're agreed figures. So there's significant savings already being achieved, and that will only get greater. PSN though is creating a network. The network itself is a tool. What it does do, and the reason we changed a few years ago, changed from being a public sector network to a public services network, is it's all about the services you can deliver over that. If the PSN becomes just a utility that everybody forgets about, then it's really achieved its goal, because then you're running the services, you're doing what you actually need to do to support your business, and the PSN is just there underneath everything. Something about the central frameworks. At the moment, we have PSN connectivity and PSN services frameworks. We have 12 suppliers on the first one, the connectivity framework, 29 on the services, and there's 1 on the GCF convergence framework. That is being replaced. We're working on the new frameworks at the moment. There will be maybe a couple of frameworks. They're looking to be live this year. We're looking for 70 plus suppliers on those frameworks. So a significant increase in choice, a lot more SMEs involved there as well. Much greater range of those, and we're working across the PSN community, including input from local government, and I was talking to Noelle a bit earlier about how we can increase the input from local government to make sure that we genuinely, in those frameworks, ensure that they are appropriate for use for all parts of the public sector. Because one of the things we do want to achieve with these new frameworks is actually much wider take-up for the wider public sector. As you can see, sort of the goal there, at the moment, current generation, about 80% of what's going through those is coming from the central government area. We want to do that, change that around in the future to actually be about 75% coming from the wider public sector. And that's not just local authorities, that includes people like health and blue light services and all those sorts of organisations. But it's a significant change in the approach. So to do that, we need to listen to what your requirements are, and you need to be able to put your requirements into us. So it's part of the work we want to do to make sure that happens. So the next generation frameworks will just mean that we've got better ways, more buyers, more choice, smaller orders, but much more flexibility in there. But about the PSN itself and where we're going, the transformational journey. There's an establish, embrace, enhance, exploit view. We've done the majority of the establish. The embrace is really where we're going at the moment, and the enhancing. So we're sort of in those stages between those two. And really from now on, it's sort of an iteration going through the embrace, enhance, exploit, and keeping on carrying those forward. We are now in a stage where certainly all bar a few customers or departments, organisations are now compliant with PSN. A large number have actually fully moved across to PSN services. Over the coming year or so, everybody will be across on the PSN services side, probably less than that. So that's the established piece is there. We've got people to common standard, the trust is there, and we can move forward. The embrace side is about aggregating the buying. That's happening with the frameworks. Centralised commodity services, far more services running across PSN, much more availability of those. Far more services are coming out in central government, things like the electoral registration, things like that, is actually utilising PSN, so far more of those are starting to move across PSN as a matter of course. Legacy services are starting to retire, certainly things like the GSI and other services that were there in the past are starting to be retired. And a lot of the duplication is gone. We're starting to look at sort of, certainly there are places still where you get 2 or 3 different pipes going into a single building when actually you only need one service to deliver their services within that building, even if there are multiple departments. Those are the sort of things we're looking to strip out in the future. So there's a lot of those sort of things happening. We need to expand the capabilities. What services can run across it? How can we start using PSN as a utility to build upon? Exploiting is much more about actually taking the benefits out of it. And that's where really we start to get the benefits of PSN. It's not just the 146 or 130 million per year we're going to save through actually the costs of networks, but it's the amount of money we can save by sharing information, sharing services. Things like we're bringing a common identity approach, so there's a single sign-on across the public sector. That will save money, make it much easier to move around, to access services in different areas, different departments. So some of the steps that are coming along, mobility. We've had a hothouse, which I think some people here might have been involved in, to look at what we want to do with mobility. So this is looking at all forms of mobility. It's looking at the types of devices we can use, the use of Wi-Fi, sharing abilities, the ability to work from any building. Lots of different concepts on there, the roaming concepts. So there's a lot of different things we're looking at, but how can we actually utilise through the PSN concept and give that ability? Digital, very much aligned with the digital strategy. As of the beginning of this week, for those that didn't know it, PSN is now part of GDS. So we are fully under that wing for the PSN programme. There is also the frameworks part, which is under CCS still. But the rest of us are part of GDS, so we're all part of that strategy now. The trade associations, PSNGB, the Central Trade Association, is really starting to make a difference. They've been holding various seminars recently with different suppliers to teach them all about their compliance processes. They have input to our frameworks, they have input to our standards. They work very well together. They break down into several different groups to look at different areas like IA, like service management, like technical standards, commercial, to be able to input to all those things. And so we're working very collaboratively with industry through the PSNGB body. So that's making a difference to us. And it's also able to get a lot of our messages out for us. In terms of procurement, I've spoken a bit about that, but it's very much driving the way the Crown Commercial Service will operate in the future, the sort of things we want to achieve. Some of the things that are coming up in 2014. The GSI transition to PSN completes. As I say, that's going on at a fair pace now. There are still a couple of months worth of transitions to go, but the schedule is that everybody will have moved across from the GCSX at least to PSN by the end of May. The enhancements to central services and cyber operations, we're doing a review of the way we do our central operations piece at the moment, to actually be more proactive, not just be a service bridge, which is really an arbitration centre, but also to actually be able to proactively predict issues, look at capacity management across the public sector, to be able to work closely with organisations, with public sector and private sector organisations, to make sure that issues are resolved swiftly, and also to sort of be able to monitor both the security position and the other operational factors. It's a bit like for us, one of our issues is how do we do that across such a wide organisation. It's been likened to standing in the middle of a school playground with lots of screaming kids running around you and trying to focus in on one or two conversations to find out where the trouble is. It's quite difficult to do, but we need to find ways of actually filtering in and picking the right things and be able to address them quickly. The other things, the government PSN major contract awards, major departments in government have in the past done their own thing in terms of telecoms contracts. Far more now, they're moving across to the PSN side to buy through the PSN frameworks. PSN in health, I know that will be a major issue for quite a lot of people around here. There's a lot more work going on at the moment to bring PSN and health together. I was at a meeting this morning where we're talking about what we're looking at to do is actually bring the PSN IA conditions and the health IG SOC, aligning the two of them. It's come down in the last week or so from being, in the terms of the differences we're discussing, from about 48 to 12 differences or additions that you need for health. And actually, generally where there are differences because of legislation, because of different legal acts, we can accept those because if there's a law that says you've got to do something slightly differently, then you have to do it differently. But what we're trying to eliminate is the ones that are just being done differently because they are. So that's coming a lot closer together, and that's working very well at the moment, and I hope we're going to be in a position very soon where actually organisations don't have to be approved to operate with health and be approved to operate with PSN. Basically, you're approved and you operate with both. Criminal justice community is moving across to PSN at the moment. That's in progress. Widespread use of PSN in local government. It is widespread and it's increasingly so. And I think sort of the bottom ones speak for themselves. So, yeah. So summing up where we are, it is a foundation for shared services. It enables crowd. It enables all other services. It does save money. It does improve choice, and it's proven to do so. We're trying to build an open, fair, and transparent marketplace. We're aligning public sector to technology and investments. So very much this is about building something that is not special for government. It's about building something which is using commercial best practice, understanding what commercial best practice is, defining what commercial best practice is at some points, and operating everybody to a common standard. And finally, just one last time, it's not just us saying it. There are lots of different people saying about what's happening with PSN, and lots of different headlines going on at the moment. So that's what I was going to say. Thank you very much.
So in this session we're going to take questions on PSN now and then move to the other sessions. So any questions for either John or Noelle? So there's one from the back.
Andy Bates from Verizon, as you know, John. We're seeing a lot of trend in the marketplace where enterprises are going to a hybrid between internet and WAN, and this is being driven a lot by cost savings and a lot by the use of public cloud. What are the thoughts on where PSN goes with that, and do you ever see local authorities embracing that model in a PSN compliant style?
I think it's on. Have you looked at our guidance we've just done for the new classifications for PSN?
It was a leading question, of course.
If you look at that guidance, we're talking there about the different ways you can transport information, and we talk about a PSN protected environment, a PSN assured environment, and unassured networks or unassured transport. They are all viable solutions as we move forward. They all have different places. It depends on what you want of the information. So very much the internet, the assured environment, the protected environment play a part in that. PSN provides the assured and the protected part, but we recognise that there are for the public sector to do business, it needs to be operating across all three.
Steve, can I actually ask another question?
Yes, you may.
No,
I work out where that question will come from.
It's the wrong way round, I grant you, but it's just a point about the Solutions Advisory Group, the SAG, and about the method of payment for the crowdfunding arrangement. So at the moment, it looks like the only mechanism to pay is through a sort of credit card approach, and I suppose it's just a question about whether people have found it difficult to pay, and if it needs to be made easier at all. Just to understand what could be holding people back from contributing.
There's an answer in the middle over there from...
I know this is the wrong way round, but
Hi, Mike Zammit, Blackburn with Darwin. We had that issue. We don't have corporate payment cards. I contacted Socitm. They invoiced us. We paid them. Done.
So that hasn't held you up at all?
No.
Or held you back from...
No.
Yeah.
There might be a perception that
Yeah.
because the words don't say that on the website.
Yeah.
We know we need to probably change those words on the website. Is there a perception that that's hard to do? Mike says it's not hard to do. Is there a perception elsewhere? Or is that not a problem?
I think it's very hard to do. I'd much rather pay on the website with a corporate card, so it is down to...
Yeah. If you have one, that's what you do. Yeah.
Can I just say, Steve, the reason we made that decision was because we were trying to keep as much cost out of the administration of bringing the funds together so that we could put it into SAG, and clearly raising an invoice and processing that is more costly. So I think there's a willingness and a happiness to do that where it's necessary, but the more that we can pass through the website to keep the transaction costs down, the better. So that was the reason for making that the main focus.
Thank you for the question, Noel. Any other questions from the audience? Or from the panel? Or from the photographer? It's a question at the back.
It's me again. You said about 40-50% savings. Telecoms market is a falling market. Can you kind of comment on how much savings are across the industry compared to that?
Not off the top of my head, I'm afraid I can't, no.
Or I'm kind of going with, we're seeing a lot of people doing 30% write-downs when they renew a WAN contract, so I suppose what you're actually saying is PSN is 10 or 20% better than the market, as opposed to a pure 50% savings.
We're saying 50% on the business cases, so in terms of what people were expecting, putting their business cases beforehand, in terms of what they're doing now, the sort of figures they're looking at, yeah, in PSN we're seeing 40-50% reduction.
Okay, so I suppose at worst, at least it feels consistent with the rest of the telecoms market, which is good.
Yes.
That was a hard question. Then we've got an easy question. Or any other question at all? Okay, we'll draw close to the PSN conversation, and many thanks to the two speakers. Much appreciated.